Morning. Today is Wednesday, Chai Elul, the 18th day of Elul. It is the Yom Holedes, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, Baal Tanya, that we learn every day, is Tanya. And so let's begin also with giving the tzedakah. Do it at home or whenever you listen to this class. So today we are finishing chapter 15 in the Igeret Hakodesh, and in this chapter the Alter Rebbe explained the makeup of the emotional characters of the person. He explained the seven emotive characters, the attributes, and he explained what it comes from, the source of it, which is the intellect, because the intellect brings about the emotions. And as you remember, when we began this chapter, the Alter Rebbe explained why is he saying this. Because it says, that God created us in His image, and therefore, by understanding, excuse me, by understanding the emotive attributes and the intellectual attributes in the human being, we will be able to understand the way it is by Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe now continues how these emotive attributes, we have them both. Till now, he explained in the physical, in the animal soul, and now the Alter Rebbe explains how this is also true in the godly soul. The way this helps us to serve Hashem with all of the emotive attributes and with the intellect. So let's see inside. Alter Rebbe, ve'inei kol zeh u'rak al derech mashal levad. Now, all this above mentioned effect of the emotive traits upon the resultant teachings or influence is only by way of analogy and does not provide a completely true picture of the Sephirot as they exist within man's soul. The Sephirot, of course, being the attributes. Because all this applies to the rational soul, which is the lower one in man, and derives from the klipas noiga. As we explained, that the animal soul by a Jew comes from the place which is called the klipas noiga. It is the shell which potentially can become light, become good. So there, when you use the emotions, it can be used in both ways. And you have an emotion of a positive emotion, you have the emotion of chesed, of kindness, of giving. It can be used in a positive way, it can be used in a negative way. But when it comes to those attributes, those emotions, emotive attributes in the godly soul, it is purely to serve Hashem, as he's going to explain. But in true fact, with regard to the spheres in the higher divine soul, which is a part of God above, that's what we learned in the beginning of the Tanya, how the soul, the godly soul, is literally a part of Hashem. So kol hamidos pnimiyos vechitzonios hein laHashem levadei. So all the internal and external attributes are directed to God alone. As you remember, yesterday we explained there are the internal attributes and the external attributes. The internal attributes are the love and the fear. The external is what it makes the person doing. The external attributes is the attribute of the love leads to giving, the fear leads to restricting, and so on. But because of one's love of God and because of one's great desire to cleave unto Him, so he desires with all his being to practice chesed in order to cleave to His attributes. You want to cleave to Hashem, and the way to do it is through cleaving and emulating Hashem's attributes. This accords with the teaching of our sages of blessed memory and the verse, and to cleave unto Him. That's what the Torah says. We should cleave unto God. So what does it mean, cleaving unto God? Who can ever attach himself or cleave to God? The Gemara says what that means is to cleave unto His attributes. When Hashem is kind, act kind, and so on. So with every attribute, you're using it in a way that Hashem wants us to use it. It is likewise with the attribute of Gevura. Gevura is the attribute of restriction, judgment, whose internal aspect is fear. As we explained yesterday, for example, when you're restricting what you give to your son, to your child, because of fear that if you're not restricting, he may misuse it. So the fear leads to restricting. So how do you use this attribute of Gevura in a holy way, in a godly way? So it says, for example, to punish and chastise the wicked with the punishment of Torah. In the Torah, there is different punishments for different sins. When you're acting that way, you're using the Gevura in a godly way. Of course, this is something that people may take it and say, okay, I'm going to be acting godly. I'm going to start punishing people. So the Alter Rebbe says here, there's a much bigger and stronger way of using out the restrictive attribute, and that is to overcome your own desires, to restrict your own desires. Because going around and punishing people does not necessarily come from a holy side. Sometimes people will do it just because that's the nature. They enjoy punishing people. In any case, says the Alter Rebbe, and also to prevail over one's evil inclination and to sanctify himself in that which is permitted to him. You have a kosher piece of steak, but it doesn't mean that you have to eat it. You can restrict yourself. That chocolate is kosher, and that mousse cake is also kosher. But you can restrict yourself. And the same thing is also when you're restricting yourself not to say something to offend somebody else. And to put a fence and a hedge around the Torah. Because of the dread and fear of God, lest he might come to sin, heaven forbid. So this is the attribute of Chesed and the attribute of Gevurah. Same thing, says the Alter Rebbe, is with the attribute of Tiferes, which is the attribute of beauty. To beautify anything which is godly and the Torah. Says the Alter Rebbe, V'chein lefire es Hashem v'teirose b'chol minei pe'er. Likewise, by exercising the attribute of Tiferes, which literally means beauty, that a man seeks to glorify God and his Torah in all ways possible, such as by possessing a beautiful Sefer Torah, beautiful tefillin, and the like. So this is the attribute of Tiferes, using beauty in the service of Hashem. And to cleave to his praise by praising God with all the faculties of his soul. That is by intellectual and thoughtful meditation on the greatness of Hashem. And likewise, when he speaks of his praise, his praises are not empty words, but grow out of his preparatory meditation. So this is the attribute of Chesed Gvurah Tiferes. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says also there is the attribute of Netzach. Netzach is the victory, to stand strong, to stand firm. Just like we explained in the human terms, when you have the attribute of Chesed, makes you decide to want to give, but the decision may be a theoretical one. But when it comes to action, to actually give, sometimes you need to fight with yourself and go against anything that will stop you from doing. That is the attribute of Netzach. And so the same thing is also in the service of Hashem. Likewise, by exercising the attribute of Netzach, a man seeks to prevail triumphantly against anything that would restrain him from the service of Hashem and from cleaving unto him. And against anything that would restrain the state of revelation in which the entire earth is filled with the glory of Hashem. Like the wars for God fought by King David, peace to him. So all this comes from the attribute of Chesed, of Netzach. And now says the Alter Rebbe goes on to the attribute of Hod. Hod is thanking, giving the praise to Hashem. Likewise, by exercising the attribute of Hod, which implies self-abnegation and acknowledging the transcendence of that which defies his mortal understanding. So a man seeks to prostrate himself and to self-effacingly praise Hashem. So it is from the word modeh, admitting, nullifying yourself to Hashem, and realizing that Hashem mechaye u'me'aves hakoil ve'akol botel b'metzius etzle ve'kula kamei lo choshev v'kain ve'efes mamash. Giving the praise to Hashem, who animates and creates everything, and before whom everything is essentially non-existent. and esteemed as truly nothing and all. And this is the concept of the Hod, is that although we do not grasp God's greatness, we give the thank and we admit and we prostrate ourselves to Hashem. Says the Alter Rebbe, "Va'af she'einon masigimei ruach kol efes mamash kamei," though we cannot apprehend just how everything is truly as null before Him, nevertheless, we acknowledge and genuinely concede that in absolute truth, such is the case. In addition to that, says the Alter Rebbe, the concept of Hod as also thanking Hashem. Hod is also from the word saying Todah, which means thanks to Hashem. To thank Hashem for all the goods that He did to us. That's what Alter Rebbe says, Bichlal zeh, gam ken lo idus l'Hashem al kol hativus asher gmalanu. This attribute also includes the expression of gratitude to God for all the favors that He has bestowed upon us. Veloi liyos kfui toiva chas v'sholem, so that we should not be a kfui toiva, meaning we should not be ungrateful, God forbid. In addition to that, says the Alter Rebbe, ubichlal zeh leoidos al kol shevachav umidosav upulosav ba'atzilus ubrias elyonim tachtonim. This attribute of Hod also includes the offering of thanks to God for all His praiseworthy deeds and his attributes and His workings in the emanation and creation of the upper and lower worlds, sheheim meshubachim ad ein tachlis or ad ein cheker, for they are praiseworthy to no end. And they are becoming and befitting Him, blessed and exalted be He. Vihu milashon hod v'hada. And the term Hod is here to be understood as in the phrase Hod v'hadar, majesty and splendor. So we see in the attribute of Hod has a number of different applications. And finally, says the Alter Rebbe, the attribute of Yesod. As we mentioned yesterday, what is Yesod? Yesod, the foundation. Yesod is the connection, the desire to connect. As we gave the example yesterday, when you want to teach a child or a student, and you do it with a desire to give, the desire is the connection. And that creates both in the teacher an ability to give better and in the recipient to receive in a deeper way. And this Yesod is Tzaddik Yesod Olam, the Tzaddik foundation of the world, because the Tzaddik is really deeply connected to Hashem. That's what said Alter Rebbe. Likewise, engaged in one's divine service in the attribute of Yesod, literally means foundation, as in the phrase that Tzaddik is the foundation of the world. So the above analogy, it was by means of the attribute of Yesod that the Father communicated with His Son, as we just mentioned, and discipled through bond of desire and pleasure. So the same thing is the desire and pleasure to connect to Hashem. So that one's soul is bound up with God, the fountainhead of life. Cleaving to Him with an attachment and a desire out of a wondrous love and delight. And so the Yesod is the foundation, the desire to connect. And finally, the last level, the last attribute, the attribute of Malchus, kingdom, is to actually connecting, actually giving. As for the divine soul's attribute of Malchus, the worshipper seeks thereby to accept upon himself the yoke of Hashem, of Hashem's sovereignty, and of his service. Like the service of any servant to his master, meaning out of awe and fear. So this is, it went through all these 7 attributes, emotive attributes. And now the goes the Alter Rebbe saying, what is the root of these attributes? What is the root of these attributes? So just like we said in the physical terms, in the human terms, that the root of the emotions comes from the intellect, the same thing is also the understanding, the intellect, chachma, bina, and das are the root that create these attributes that we use in connecting to Hashem. Now the source and root of all the attributes are in the Chabad, the Hainu. So he goes and explains the Chachma in Moker HaSeichel HaMasik is Hashem. What is the Chachma? Chachma is the source of the intellect. That's even before the intellect. That's the source of it. Because Chachma is something that Chachma is like seeing something. When you see something, it's not something that you need to understand, to develop in your mind. Chachma is the source, the root of everything. When you see everything, it is something that is given to you. And is therefore the Moker HaSeichel, is the source of the intellect, which apprehends God and his wisdom, his greatness, and the holy attributes wherewith he conducts and animates all the higher and lower worlds. Bina, now what is Bina? Bina is when the actual intellect begins, the developing of the intellect, the understanding of the intellect. Bina is the contemplation of this apprehension of God's greatness and his holy attributes. And to understand it in a proper way, says the Alter Rebbe, it comes in 3 dimensions. In length and breadth and depth of one's understanding. What are these 3 dimensions? The length is when something is a profound concept and you bring it down to levels that you can understand. And the width, the breadth, is when you learn different applications to what you understand. This widens it. And then depth is going deeper into your understanding. Depth, in a way, is the opposite of the length. Length bringing down. Depth is, with your understanding, you're trying to reach deeper and deeper into what this understanding, what this intellect really means. In order to understand or deduce one matter out of another, and from this apprehension to beget its offspring. What is the offspring? As we said, the emotions of love and fear, which are the attributes of love and awe. And the other attributes born in the divine soul, which contemplates and meditates upon God's greatness as to how his greatness is unfathomable. So this is the greatness or understanding, and that leads to awe, leads to deep respect, a deep, awesome or of Hashem. ויש בחינת גדולת השם שעל ידי הזבנינוס הנפש של הקצבות תיפול עליה אימוס ופחד. One aspect of God's greatness is such that the divine soul, when contemplating it, is overwhelmed by fear and dread. Sheyi yira tator shehi bchinas malchus. This is yira tator, the lower level of fear, which is an aspect of malchus. Then there is a higher level of yira, a higher level of fear of Hashem. The higher level of yira, he calls it yiras boishes. V'yesh bchinas gedulas Hashem shemimena bo yira ila yirash boishes. There's another aspect of the greatness of God from the contemplation of, which derives yira ila, the superior level of yira, which is one in which one is awed out of bashfulness. An example that the Alter Rebbe gives in a different place of the yira ila, yiras boishes, is when a person is ashamed or has a deep respect and awe from a tzaddik, a holy man. Because there's different types of people that can lead you to fear them. For example, you're fearful of a police officer. Police officer stops you, you're fearful of him. Why? Because of the authority that he has and whatever he can do to you. But it's not that the person, the officer himself, is someone who is himself to be fearful. But when it comes to a tzaddik, a holy man, I remember when we used to go to the Rebbe, we used to go over, we used to prepare emotionally, spiritually, deeply, standing in front of a tzaddik. And it wasn't an easy thing. It was a really draining emotionally, coming to the Rebbe and standing in front of the Rebbe. That's called yiras boishes, because this is the tzaddik himself. So similarly, when you're thinking about the greatness of Hashem, that leads to that deeper level of yira, deeper level of awe. And then there is also then an aspect of God's greatness from the contemplation of, which derives Avarabba, the great love, and still another aspect of God's greatness from the contemplation of, which derives Avazuta, the lesser love. This is also true. The same applies with the external attributes. What are the external? Shem Chesed, Chulu, Chesed, and so on. They too are coming from the intellect. Now, the faculty of das must be vested within all these emotive attributes. What is the das? So we explain many times. Das is the connection. Das is when you connect. You connect the intellect to the emotions. Because you can understand a certain thing, but if you're not connecting to it, your understanding is not going to lead you to any emotions. Just like you have two people of two different parties, they have the same information and they understand it the same way, but yet they have different feelings towards this politician or that politician or this policy or that policy. That is the das. The das is connecting the intellect to the emotions, depending how they are connected. For it represents the bond with which the soul is bound and embedded in this apprehension. As it apprehends some aspect of God's greatness from which one of these attributes is born within it. because by a momentary removal of das from this apprehension, the emotion born of it is also withdrawn. So the das is connection. You need to be connected in order to feel. And it becomes withdrawn from its prior state of manifestation in the soul back into the concealment within the soul. And thereby to exist there in potential, but not in actuality. This is why das, the union between male and female, is referred to as das, because that's the idea of connection. That is why the term das is applied to coercion, for it signifies a bond that results in issue, just as out of das are born the emotions. This is the lower level of das. The lower level of das, which extends into the attributes and vests itself in them to animate and sustain them. Then says the Alter Rebbe, there is a concept of das elyon, a higher level of das. What is the difference between the higher and the lower? So the lower level of das is the one that connects the intellect to the emotions. The higher level of das is the one that connects the chachma to the bina. That seeing of godliness to understanding also needs a das, and that is the higher level of das. That is connected with the keser, with the crown, which is above the chachma bina. There's also a faculty of das elyon, a superior level of das, through which the source of the intellect that apprehends the profundity of a concept is bound and connected to it. So this is the chachma connecting to the bina. She is like a point of flash or a flash of lightning that flashes over one's mind, so that the concept will extend downward. The profundity of the apprehended concept will thereby come to be understood. With extensive clarification in length and breadth. This stage being the function of the faculty of bina, which is known as rechovot hana'ar, literally the expanses of the river, as will be explained in its place. So this is the end of chapter 15, the long chapter, and gives us an overview of the emotive attributes in the physical, in the person, and then the way it works also in the godly soul, in the spiritual parts, and how it connects with the intellect, and how it connects with das, the connecting the intellect to the emotions and connecting the intellect itself from the chachma to the bina, which is called the das elyon. All of this leads us to be able to serve Hashem properly, as appropriate on this day of Chai Elul. As the Rebbe says, this is the day that brings the life into Elul, the birth of the founders of Hasidus and the founder of Hasidus Chabad. Thank you for joining. And Mirz Hashem, we shall see you tomorrow. And don't forget to share this and invite people to join us live.